Joining me right now, the woman that made that fateful phone call, Joanne Coles. Joanne, thank you for being with us. Could you describe that phone call and what went through your mind?
Well, it's interesting that I lived in so much denial at that moment, but I thought for sure that maybe they were sick, had the flu, something else was going on. Uh, so I called them the first time and they went to the door. The second time I asked them to please look through the garage window and tell me whether or not their car was in the garage. So I knew that their car was in the garage. They only had one car. Um, and I knew that they were not answering the door and all the lights were off. So my husband and I drove out to Montreux to check on them.
Joanne, when you called and no one answered, you assumed that they were in bed with a cold. Is that correct?
Yes. Or the flu, or that they were sick. Yes.
And what led you to get in the car and drive to check on your parents? What inner voice told you you could not just rely on them not picking the phone up? You had to drive there and find out for yourself.
My parents moved to Reno to be near me and for me to help them. So I took that responsibility very seriously. And when the answering machine didn't pick up and they didn't respond to knocks on the door, it was snowing that night, and I knew that my father did not like to drive in the snow anymore. And with the car in the garage, I felt compelled to go out and find out what happened.
Listen,
Joanne and her husband decide to check on her parents themselves. They make the drive to Montreux as a snowstorm blows in. Joanne unlocks the front door and calls for her parents. When there's no answer, Joanne steps into the home but freezes. There's mud tracked through the entryway and dining room. Joan would never let a mess like that sit. Joanne's husband walks toward the primary bedroom and, to his horror, finds Joan and Albert shot to death in their bed.
at this hour, law enforcement begging for tips. If you know or think you know anything about the murders of this beautiful couple, please dial 775-328-3320. Repeat, 775-328-3320. Joan, I do not enjoy asking you to relive that moment. For people that are not familiar with your parents' story, could you describe what happened when you finally get to their home? What happened? And I'd also like to hear what was going through your mind en route as you made that drive.
We had left our two sons at home alone. They were 14 and 10 at the time. And as we were driving over, it was about 7:15, and I was thinking, oh, getting home in time to put them to bed. Because given on their own, they would have stayed up later than they should on a school night. So I looked at the clock when we were driving down the street to their house and thinking, I'll be home in time for them to go to bed. When we got to the house and went in the garage door, because I had the garage door opener and I knew the alarm code, when I walked through the garage and got into the kitchen and then into the dining room, I saw the mud on the floor. And I have to say, at that point, my heart kind of stopped because I knew that my mother would not have gone to bed with mud on the floor. That was just not her. She was a fastidious house cleaner and always kept a beautiful home.
I'm just wondering what went through your mind when you saw that mud on the floor. Like, Joanne, my mom lives with us, and I remember just recently I walked in a room and I saw her walker just sitting there without her. And that never, ever, ever happens. And I knew immediately something was wrong. And sure enough, something was very wrong. And I ended up taking her to the emergency room. There's that when you know someone so well and you know their behavior, when you saw that mud on the floor, you said your heart stopped?
Yes, and I told my husband that I couldn't go any further.